What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of our Homestead from Scratch show here on the Tinker Tribe channel. And I'm joined by John tonight, John Tejan from DJ Cattle Company. He is doing regenerative beef in his efforts. And so, what's up, John? Welcome. And
Yeah,
what's
no,
been going on, man?
everything's good here on the farm. The cows are getting fat, which is really good to see. This time of year, there's way more grass than my cows can eat, so that's a good problem to have.
Eh, Yeah,
Cause, cause in the wintertime, it's the other problem. I got too many cows and not enough grass. Right now, I got too much grass and not enough cows. But having too much grass is not a problem. I mean, you just graze it as best you can and leave it for the next rotation since I rotationally graze. So it's all good. They're looking really healthy. They seem to be happy. Their uptake on minerals has gone up quite a bit, which is normal in the springtime because um, they don't drink that much water this time of year. I mean, they do drink water, but I mean, the forage that spring forage has got so much water in it, you
yeah.
don't really have to worry about it too much. I mean, you still give them access to water, obviously, but it's not. You don't see them crowding around the trough drinking all the time. But that'll change once it gets a little bit hotter. So not a problem. So everything's going good. The uh, I know part of what we may be talking about is plum disease tonight. Mine are doing good so far. So they're looking good. I have purple plums, and then I have some just regular plums, red plums, and they all seem to be doing good. The persimmons are putting on fruit. My pawpaws, I've never had them actually fruit, so they actually had blooms on them this year. So I'm waiting to see if they turn into little baby pawpaws. So we'll see what happens. But other than that, everything's going good on the homestead.
Excellent. Yeah, so we are currently dealing with this issue. It is it's called a black knot on some plum trees that we have,
Yep.
and um, I know that the a lot of the fruit bearing trees and trees in general, you have to be very careful on, number one, we live in such a humid environment that
Yep.
it's going to be more susceptible to fungal type attacks. And I believe with the health of trees and with the health of most biological life on this planet, I believe is, may a lot of times could be an effect of a nutrient deficiency of some kind. Maybe the tree isn't getting everything it really needs, or sanitation issues like we're talking about, like if it's not pruned well enough, if there's not enough airspace, and you're in a very humid environment that you make a habitat for the fungus to grow, and the light can't get in there and maybe help deal with some of that stuff. But I'm not so versed in dealing with the health of these trees, so I just want to have a little bit of a discussion on that tonight. And maybe you've run into different types of
Yeah.
diseases on trees, and how you may have handled those things.
Yeah. All those things you said about ways of preventing and their your cultivation methods that you use. One that you didn't put in there is this is true with apples. This is true with most stone fruit, stuff like that. There are certain cultivars that are more resistant than others, and some that are more susceptible than others.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Another thing that causes it, well, doesn't cause it, but makes it more susceptible is there are some cultivars that just won't do well where you're at. You
I,
know,
I I
they're
totally
just not,
forgot about that, but yeah, you're completely
you know,
if that plant is adapted for this type of environment, it might create something that helps it stave off those fungal
right,
infections and things like
right, and that's sometimes, and this is not advice by the way, but sometimes trying to fix the problem, you're almost better off cutting it down and planting a variety that'll actually work. You know what I'm saying? You can chase your tail on this. You can prune it back to make sure you cut out all the rot and leave a rather small tree. And hopefully it comes back. That can happen. I don't know about any sort of foliar applications that will cure it, but black. I now that I know that it's black knot, that's probably one of the more terminally bad things for plum trees. Black knot, and the other is plum borers. They just bore in, and I had my plum tree has those. There's holes in it. It's leaking sap, but it's loaded with fruit. When that happens, a lot of times that response of hyper productivity,
yeah.
it's gonna be your last year for that tree. It's putting everything it has into that last crop before
Oh,
it dies. I know that sounds bad, but it's true. They have that final surge when they know that things aren't going well, and hopefully so they can replicate, right? Reproduce,
right.
which is the reason why they exist. And so yeah, so yeah, those are the borers and black knot are probably the two worst things that you can have on plums or apples or pears, those type of fruits. But I think the humidity, obviously, since it's a fungal disease, that's because when you prune, I have a friend of mine who it actually, it causes him, emotional damage when he has to go in there and prune a tree because he just doesn't like pruning. It's like, oh my God, I'm cutting away
You're gonna hurt the tree.
these perfectly good, limbs, and it's like, that's fine. But if you don't have enough airspace, like you were saying, and
You
if
invite disease, I think.
especially if you're in a a lower area on your property that is going to stay damp and more moist and more humid,
Collects a lot of humidity and dew and dampness.
right. And where I have my prunes, thinking plums, which is
Plums.
the prunus species, I guess I was thinking of, um, is on top. It's actually at the highest point on my property. That's a double-edged sword because the lower parts of my property are the most fertile. The higher parts are the least fertile, right?
Right.
Just by thousands of years of rainfall and erosion, the good soil on the top gets washed down into the lower
top
part.
soil gets eroded down.
Yeah, so in the lower spots, great soil, but way too humid. Because actually, and I don't want to deviate from the topic, but we're talking about trees, so not too much. We had we've had a pretty good spring. There's not been any really bad freezes late in the season that the past couple of years have just kind of wiped me out from mulberries to apples to plums or whatever.
Same here.
Even the trusty blackberry got knocked back pretty good last year. But I'm planting out a lot of trees out in my pasture, which is kind of a silvopasture technique that I'm using. And I got from Logan, who's not here, I got some mulberries from him, and I planted them. Oh, I don't know, it's probably been a month ago. They're probably little 3-foot seedlings, healthy, doing good. I planted them out, but the area where I have these trees is in that lower spot, and it's like we didn't technically have a freeze or a heavy frost, but in those lower spots, you will get frost when the rest of your property is completely good
because the cold air is sinking. Yeah.
And so there's some damage on those. There was some damage on most of my trees in those. I'm like, nothing's eaten on it. The leaves just kind of turn brown on the edges, which means they got burned by the freeze.
Yeah.
But so yeah, location has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, because
Especially when
there's
it comes
microclimates all over your
right,
landscape, right?
right, and you might have the right species, but in the wrong location, right? You
Yeah.
know, so those are all possibilities. So
Also, one big mistake that one big error I think we made when planting a lot of these trees is we planted the same species of tree very close to each other in the same row.
uh
And I think if you break it up between like different species of trees
yes,
and the spacing, give them some more space,
right.
that if there is some type of disease, it may be less likely that they spread it to each other. But it also may be the fact that they're in the they're in a bad spot on the property, and
Right.
and they're not able to remove the moisture as well as they need to.
Yeah, and that problem you're talking about is planting the same cultivars or even species right next to each other. They may be the same cultivar. It's not just for disease; it's for pests as well.
Yeah.
There's a guy up in Canada that I follow. Although the weather is completely different than down here, he still has some interesting techniques, and he doesn't plant the same species next to each other. And he plants like a nitrogen fixing legume, and then a pear, and then like a nut tree, and then an apple tree. So the space between the trees is pretty big. And
Yeah.
the idea behind it, obviously this is, I don't know, scientific fact, but it certainly makes a lot of common sense, is so a pest gets on one apple, and if there's another apple right next to it, it's just going to jump over to the next one. But if it's an insect that likes apples and it jumps on a nut tree, it's going to be like, oh shit, I'll go back to the one I was eating on because this isn't any good, and it never spreads to that other apple. You see what I'm saying? And vice
Right.
versa with nut, because pests like certain species are they hone in on a certain species of fruit. Some like apples more than they like plums. Some like on nuts. You've got weevils and stuff like that. So spacing those out, and that's where diversity comes in, right? That's the good thing about having a real diverse orchard. Even if it's things that you don't even like, but it kind of provides that natural barrier there. And so that's certainly one way to avoid that. I'm glad you kind of analyzed your situation. And go, yeah, okay, this may have been a mistake here.
Yeah, yeah, and whenever you start doing this kind of stuff, I mean, if you wait to figure it out all in the beginning, I mean, you may not even do anything. So,
You'll never put a
um,
shovel in the dirt.
right. So, it's important to get started, and trees take a long time to develop, and specifically fruit trees and things like that. So,
Mhm.
so you really need to, like, I don't know, get started and kind of figure stuff out. But yeah, if I was going to give advice to people out there that are looking to get started, is to consider those things when you're getting started, and yeah, maybe not plant the same species very close to each other, and you know do different species in between each other for those reasons, so that you may help prevent some diseases and things like that. But
Well, you know what? Some people do that just because they they don't understand. This happens more with apples than anything. Well, mainly with apples, because apples you need two varieties in order for them to pollinate. They need to cross pollinate between two different cultivars. You can't just plant an apple tree. Well, you can plant an apple tree, but hopefully there's your neighbor has one, a quarter mile down the road. The pollen blows in and fertilizes it or pollinates it. So when people hear that. It's like, well, I have to have two species because they cross pollinate. Well, I'm gonna put them right next to each other, right? Because it'll pollinate easier. And it's like, that sounds good, but that, if you could radioactively tag pollen particles and see them floating around in the air, you'd be surprised that it's like, oh wow, that one, 100 feet down in my row, there's plenty of pollen from that blowing down onto the other tree to pollinate it. It's they don't need to be right next to each other. So yeah, but people overanalyze that and go, well, I need two varieties, so I'm gonna just put them right next to each other so they can like really, I'm gonna have more fruit that way, because it's gonna have more pollinations. Like my apples just never had a problem with that. There's plenty of other problems with them, but
I wonder if this is the guy they were both thinking about.
the perma, yes, Stefan, yeah,
Stefan Sobuyak.
Yeah, he's got a very active YouTube channel, and he's a pretty neat guy. He started out.
Uh-oh.
And and he just was getting killed by pests and all sorts of stuff, and he didn't want to be spraying his apple trees with chemicals, every 7 to 10 days in order for them to survive. So he started ripping up his orchard and replanting it in the way he describes in his material. But it's pretty basic, it's a very basic approach. There's not a lot of difficulty understanding. It's just, make sure there's trees of different species between the same species you have, and there's plenty of room. And he's pretty interesting. I haven't watched him in a while, because not that I learned everything I could from him, but it was kind of becoming a little repetitive, and he kind of veered off into some other things. But he's a good guy, and yeah, it's definitely well worth watching his videos. Just if you're living in the southeast, don't pay any attention to the cultivars he's using, because they're probably not going to grow that well down here. But the techniques he uses are spot on.
Yeah, who's a good guy to follow if you're in the southeast? Is that maybe David the Good? I know he does a lot of stuff with permaculture. I think he's in Alabama, actually.
Yeah, he kind of floats. He's an interesting guy. He's lived in Central America and Southern Florida and Alabama. He was actually in Tennessee for a while. He moves. I don't know why he moves around so much, but maybe it has to do with his wife's job or something. I don't know. But everywhere he goes, he's like plugging in and doing his thing, which is. And he's not afraid to try different things and kind of go against the grain of what most people say, because I guess one of his I would call him the frugal gardener, because he's not going to spend a lot of money on expensive chemicals and fertilizers and stuff like this. I mean, he's kind of permaculture by economic necessity. Although I'm sure he has plenty of money, he just wants to do it himself and not depend on going to the garden store every weekend to buy more chemicals, and he's just never been into that. But good guy.
Yeah, I really think like the diversity, having multiple species of trees and plants, all kind of intermingled in an orchard is that's just a way that everything kind of benefits each other and kind of helps bring in, like we talk about quite a bit, is like building the soil is kind of the key to the health of the plants that you're attempting to grow. And the more living roots, I believe, that you have in the soil really can bring in those different microbes. we had a discussion talking a little bit about when you introduce um, the fertilizers into the equation, and the roots basically get lazy, right? Because they're getting everything they need immediately, and they're kind of like not sending out the signals into that soil food web, I guess, to get those guys to work, help work for them, and
Right.
so
Yeah.
you kind of
It's kind of like having a teenager and he's like, well, why should I get a job and move out? You feed me and put a roof over my head. So I'm going to get really lazy and not worry about that. That's kind of what plants do. If you're just feeding them all the chemicals that they need, they never develop the soil. There's no need for the microbiome in there. I mean, there always going to be a need for it, but it's going to be suppressed because they don't need to perform that function. The synthetics are doing it for it. Um,
right,
so that doesn't mean that synthetics are killing your microbiome. It's just suppressing it because it's not needed. At least from the plant's point of view, it's like, well, I'm getting all my nitrogen, my phosphate, everything I need right here. So I'm not going to send out those signals to say, hey, fungus over here, go mine some phosphorus for me and send it over, and so on and so forth, right? Um,
right, right,
but because um, that's why commercial agriculture works, right? But it works, but it's a I don't know what the phrase is. It's not sustainable, right? I mean, you're dependent on your inputs, right, and not your soil. Because I was watching somebody and he goes, I know this one farmer. He basically said, I don't really even need soil. I only have soil to hold the roots in the ground. I can give it everything it possibly needs, synthetically. And it's like, well, that's one way to farm. Certainly not a way I would suggest doing it, but to each his own. You look like you're frozen there. Oh, okay. He tapped out and he'll be back in. Okay, Greg. Come on, buddy. He's tagging in, tapping out, tagging in. But anyway, for the rest of the folks, that's kind of the way it goes. Technology issues. Do. You must be having some technical issues. I hope it's not a connection issue, which could be. I don't know what his internet's like. It's usually pretty reliable. Yes, technical issues here. Not a problem. He'll bring it up here in a second. Do. This goes live unedited, so bear with us. We can't cut this out of the video because it's just live and that's just the way we do it. So bear with us, or fast forward till you see his smiling face on here. Maybe you had to reboot. I don't know. That could take a few minutes. Okay, he's gonna leave and reconnect to the browser real quick. So he's probably gonna reboot his browser and come back in. So that's not a problem. That'll take a minute or two. He'll be back, no problem.
Hey, can you
You back? Oh, he was back for a second.
hear me?
I can hear you, can't see you.
Okay. Well, great. Um,
That's better
yeah,
than
man,
nothing.
this is really strange. Let's see.
There you go.
Well,
Uncover your camera.
let me see. Well, let me see if I can switch it back to my.
Oh, just lost him again. I think he figured it out.
All
There
right,
you go. You're
I'm
good.
back.
You switch cameras?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. If something is for some reason it's not liking that I have like two video inputs or something. It's getting confused.
Ah,
Something like that.
that can
So
happen. That can happen.
so yeah, I don't know. But it
I
seems like
told
everything's doing okay.
I told our audience to be patient and not knowing how long it was going to take. Just fast forward to the other portion of the since we just do this in one shot and there's no fancy editing here.
Yeah. So
Ain't got time for that, man.
ain't nobody got time for that. But
No. Uh-uh.
well, yeah, where were we at? We're talking kind of about the doing some ideas on where you are going to plant your trees, kind of
Kind of do it.
looking
We're kind
into
of
the
talking about
environment and you're picking the correct varieties for your that are more adapted to your
and
environment.
just having diversity in the type of trees you have in your orchard or in the whether it's an orchard or however you have it orchard, food forest, they're kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Just but that's I think food forest is I think that's I guess that term's still used a bit, in permaculture, but it's really just a fancy it's an orchard that's kind of more random. It's a random orchard, really, what it is. And there, and even we were talking about Stefan there. One of the things he also does, he I'm not a permaculture certified permaculturist, but I've read some of the study materials on it. But there's uh, I know there's zones where you plant things, whether based on the location of your living space, and expands out there. But there's
Right.
also a horizontal zone when it comes to trees, and not just trees, but plants. You have rooting plants, you have climbing plants, you have shrubs, you have trees, you
Yeah.
know, and he interplants all of that stuff in between his trees. So he's not just doing an apple and a pear. He's doing an apple and a pear, and he might have some raspberries and some garlic growing in there, and he might have some muscadines growing up the trees. So that's where the kind of food forest and orchard kind of overlap, and that's why I think he's doing it the right way. Well, he does it a way that I agree with. I wouldn't say it's right, because the only right way is the one that works where you live, and that may be completely different than. And Greg and I don't live that far from each other. We're about an hour and a half away from each other, but
I think we're
oh,
still in about the same zone, agricultural zone, but
right, but there can be huge differences in what you can grow
yeah,
successfully in those two areas. So it's like I could tell Greg what variety works for me, and it might not work for him. So it is
right,
all very specific to where you live, the soil and the microclimate that you have, the prevailing winds. There's a lot of things that. So, and that's one of the things I was going to get to. While Stefan kind of gives you some suggestions how he does it, um, homesteading, permaculture, it is not by nature a prescriptive science. It doesn't go, okay, you plant this, like kind of like your basic, like gardens. It's like, well, you need to plant each seed a quarter inch deep, and they need to be 2 inches apart, and that's the way you're supposed to plant. Well, yeah, okay, that's prescriptive. They're telling you exactly how to do that, and you just, when it comes to permaculture and successfully growing things. Now we're talking in a permaculture manner where you're cutting back on synthetic fertilizers and chemical sprays and stuff like that. Although you might want to use some of those in extreme cases, I'm not against that. I'm not 100% ideologically pure when it comes to that.
right,
But it just in the back of your mind, remember it's all an experiment, and you try things, and if they don't work, make a few changes. If it still doesn't work, maybe move on to something else, and you try a different variety, a different species, whatever. It doesn't mean you failed. It just means you haven't succeeded yet, and you'll get there, right?
right. Yeah, that's really important because in a lot of things, it's really how you respond to those failures
Right.
is the difference between being successful and just getting caught in more and more of those things kind of stacking up on you. Like if
Right.
you're not, my previous life was in doing some research on like materials and things like that. And I believe it was a quote from Albert Einstein. Well, it was a quote from, it may have been from Einstein, but I believe he said something to the effect of the difference between research and messing around is you write it down, So, um, we could do a lot of experiments, but if you're not learning from those experiments that you're doing and you're not retaining that information in some way, then a lot of that gets lost, and then you're constantly attempting to, I guess, reinvent the wheel sometimes,
Uh-huh.
and you can kind of get yourself in a little bit of a loop of disaster if you're not kind of like tracking some of your results. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, and you see people. I see this. Uh, there was well, and it's still popular. People still do it, and I have nothing against it. But you have to be patient with it. you know, the whole idea of just massively covering the ground with wood chips like 6 inches deep and planting into those and establishing it that way. That's fine, but you're not going to have very good results for a couple of years.
Yeah, you
You know,
need to be aware of that. Yeah.
and the thing is people go, they'll do exactly how you say, oh, you know, you put down cardboard and some dirt on it and some mulch or some wood chips, you know, and then you just plant your tomatoes right in there, and you know, and oftentimes the first year is going to be kind of a disaster.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. We attempted that experiment, and in the first season, like we didn't have good success at all, and
and
so
most
yeah, it
people,
takes some time for those wood chips to break down to
yeah,
give
most
you
people
the
go, well,
results you're looking for.
this is BS. I'm going to move on to a different method, which is fine, you know,
Yeah,
but that takes some patience, you know, because wood chips are, you know, are good for building the soil, but it takes a long time for wood fibers to break down.
yes,
And if we think about it in a composting manner, um, it's all brown and no green, right? You know, you'd have no ratio there,
right.
and the green that you're needing is nitrogen, right?
Yeah,
Well, those wood chips are going to break down, but guess what? They're pulling that nitrogen out of the soil,
yeah.
which is why your plants won't grow.
Yep.
You know, and people, you know, because they watch a YouTube video and they go, "Oh, look at this guy! He's got it. It's beautiful. It's all wood chips. There's no weeds. It's beautiful." It's some guy out in California. I don't know. He's the guy that what is a Garden of Eden
Yeah,
or
Paul.
whatever.
Yeah, I think Garden of Eden method or something like
Yeah,
that.
you know, and
Paul
it's
or
like
something.
that dude's been there forever, man. And I would
Yeah,
have liked to have done a video when he first started establishing it, and it's like, talk to me now, dude. You know, I mean,
yeah.
but the thing is they people he may warn people about that, but people are just oh well, this is a great method. I'm going to do this, and there's a little more science to it than just throwing shit on the ground and planting. You
You
know,
gotta you gotta be patient. You gotta wait for that to break down a little
yeah,
bit, and then yeah, but
yeah,
it will, help keep out some weeds, and it will, kind of build into some good soil. But it will take time. Yeah,
yeah. Now, if you're planting trees into it, that's probably not going to be as much of a problem. But an annual crop like tomatoes or any sort of vegetable crop that really, I mean, they need that nitrogen immediately during their whole lifespan because it's a one-time shot for them. You know, at the fall, if they haven't produced fruit, you know, no more tomatoes. Um,
yeah. Rabbit or sheep manure
yeah,
would be really beneficial if you're
yeah,
gardening in that way. It was one of the things that we attempted and worked out pretty well. Was to
yeah.
add some manure from sheep and really helped out the production in that little. Basically, it's a kitchen garden. Is next to the front door of the house
Uh
off
huh.
to the right over here, and it's more accessible as far as like a if you wanted to grow lettuces or tomatoes
Go
or
make a
onions,
salad, you know, real quick.
yeah,
You know.
little things that you would put in your some of your meals that it's right there and available and it's easy to access and you don't have to go walk a long distance to get to it. And then there's another garden further away, which would be, I guess in that idea of permaculture where you do different zones is that,
Mm-hmm.
that would be in a zone 2 or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
which is where we put more of our like we've grown corn and beans and squashes and cucumbers and some of those other things in that further zone where you plant it once and you pretty much walk away from it for a while, and you have to make sure it's watered and everything, um, but we've been watering all that stuff off the rain catchment and things like that, and practicing no-till methods for the soil uh, in that garden. and seen some pretty good results in that garden from the things that we planted in there. So, but yeah, it's just a continuous effort, and you know, if you think you're going to figure it out immediately, like, you know, don't wait to start doing this stuff. Like, start experimenting and start
Yeah.
getting used to doing that, because you know the society that we're living in, especially with our health, which maybe we can segue into this a little bit, is that, like, I've been
Sure.
reading this book recently, What Really Makes You Ill: Why Everything You Thought About Disease Is Wrong, by Don Lester and David Parker in here. And they have a lot of sources in this book, from the research that they've done about how a lot of the effects of illness that we see in our society now, a lot of it can be related to the petrochemical industrialization and just industrialization in general, and also electromagnetic frequency exposures that we have in our modern society. And so there's a lot of toxins, you know, and especially with common cleaning products, feminine hygiene products. You know, a lot of those things are sprayed. The cotton is sprayed with the glyphosate chemicals and things before it's harvested. That stuff gets into all those products. You know, our skin is really readily absorbing a lot of the things that we put on our skin. So, you know, those things have an effect on you. There's endocrine disrupting chemicals in a lot of our, you know, hygienic products, specifically like laundry detergents, fabric softener type things. So, you know, the environment plays a big role on the overall health of biological life. So, um, I can't recommend this book more for people. Like, I really think it's a really good read. Like I said, there's a ton of sources in here where there's other references, so that you can go and you can look up those books as well. One that is commonly referenced in this book is a book by this Dr. Robert Becker, who wrote a book called The Body Electric, talking about how, you know, our bodies are electrical. A lot of it's a chemical process in our bodies, and it's also electrical processes that are happening in our bodies. And Becker did a lot of work on studying the effects of electromagnetic frequencies and those type of things on the body. So, so yeah, those all play a big role. And, you know, specifically with our foods, and you know, with the whole Robert F. Kennedy Jr. becoming the new HHS guy and everything like that, talking about removing our artificial dyes from food. I guess they're going to ban artificial dyes, but
well, that was kind of interesting that you pointed out the petrochemical industry involved in all this. That's what he specifically is banning, is petrochemical based dyes.
yeah,
And I guess I'm assuming there's quite a few of those, or the bad ones really are. I mean, you know.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's not just that. It's you know, a lot of the things in our health industry. A lot of these drugs are derived from petrochemical processes and things like that, and they have you know, interactions in the body that they can't completely track all those interactions. And you know, you can't you watch a, you know, a pharma commercial and you get all these lists of side effects, you know, because they're going to have a ton of side effects in the body when it breaks down and starts to move through the body. So, so yeah, I think our food is more important than ever. It's like a critical point for everyone that's out there right now, that that you attempt to find and source local foods, and find a farmer that's in your area that's doing this stuff. If you're not able to do it yourself, you don't have the land space to do some things. So team up with a local farmer if you can, and if you have the access to some land, then figure out a way where you can grow a portion of your own food, reduce your food bills, and just start flexing your muscles a little bit in that area. Like everything is about the reps you put in and how, and to attain mastery in anything, right, you have to spend so many hours doing it, and you might not even attain mastery, but you're going to be a lot better than you were before by trying some stuff.
Right. Now, in that book, do they give, and this is something I'm currently interested in, do they recommend ways of detoxifying from that, or are they, because the problem is it's great to know that all these things are out there, but I'm 64 years old and my body's riddled with these chemicals.
Yeah, right now it's mainly pointing out the sources, a lot of the toxicity and its effects. And I haven't seen much like remedial stuff other than like avoiding these toxins,
Right.
like to avoid the exposures to EMF and what its side effects are in the body. It talks about how EMF exposures can disrupt your production of specifically of melatonin in the body,
Yep.
and that can cause like metabolic dysfunction. So yeah, I mean, a really good book that I ran across from this guy, his name is Clive DeCarl, but he recommended a book called Heal Yourself. In there, in that book, let me look it up really quick. In that book, it has a lot of remedies on like how you can do different detoxification techniques and things like that.
Yeah, because the one that I do and I started this fall is I think it was this fall. Yeah, because it was our joint Christmas present to each other this past, I guess it's a year ago because it took us a while to get it. We bought an infrared full spectrum sauna, and I do that religiously every day, 40 minutes a day. And I tell you what, I've had some good results. I've really had some good results on a few specific issues. And I recently started taking, because one of the things infrared saunas do is, as opposed to a traditional sauna where it's just a box that gets really hot and you start sweating, infrared sauna, it actually penetrates to the cellular level. And it actually releases toxins when it does that. It mobilizes the toxins, which, if you read about detoxification, that can also lead to problems. You're mobilizing toxins, and so your liver and your skin have to get rid of it somehow.
Yeah.
But one way, and so I started worrying about that a little bit. It's like, because I was having good results, but then I had some things. It's like, oh, maybe this is a detoxification effect that I'm getting. But I started taking bentonite clay, which will bind up toxins.
Yeah.
Because they're floating around in your bloodstream as they've been mobilized after being in the sauna, and you need something that's going to bind, a binder that it's going to, and then you just eliminate it naturally, right? It just, the clay binds to the toxins and you just eliminate it, when you go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
It's easier for your body that way. So that is actually an area that I'm really interested. Like I said, I'm 64 years old and I've been exposed to probably every kind of chemical legal, illegal,
Well,
in my lifetime.
in pretty much every industry, you're going to get exposed to different toxins.
Right.
Other than I mean, industrial agriculture, you're going to get exposed to toxins. So, other than doing some kind of regenerative agriculture or something like that, maybe the way that you can have the least amount of exposure to toxins. But just about every industry that you're going to get in, I think you're going to be exposed to to different types of chemical toxins in those industries. So.
Sure, absolutely, and I know, over my lifetime, I've been, probably in some less than desirable areas when it comes to chemicals and industrial products, and or just breathing the air. You just don't know.
Right,
You just
and
don't. You
when you're
just don't
working
know.
with, and when you're working with other guys too, it's like don't wear a respirator or whatever because you're a pussy.
Right, right, but I mean, even in the whether it's through incinerators or just stuff pumping chemicals into the atmosphere, whether
Right.
whether out of carelessness or or they didn't know that they were doing it, or they didn't know it was harmful. That stuff happens. And you know what? It happened a whole lot more when I was a kid in the '60s than it is nowadays. But maybe not. Maybe it's worse now. I have no idea. Back then, you just dug a hole in the backyard and put some gravel in it and dumped your used oil in it, and that was a cool way to get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably not the best way to do that. But hey, it worked back then.
Well, yeah, in this book, it does talk about how even like a lot of the artificial sugars. There's one part I was just reading about aspartame in particular, about it cause it has it can have an effect on the fetus development in a child. And so, yeah, there's just so much stuff that you need to kind of be aware of, especially with a lot of the household chemicals specifically. They have like it was specifically talking about for products that are made for infants too, like the talcum powders and some of the soaps and stuff for kids with some specific toxins that can be pretty harmful for them. So yeah, I mean, it's like there's a lot of stuff that's on the shelf right now that you need to be aware of. And
well, I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on here for a second.
Yeah.
Not really, but it's almost that if a product was developed during the '80s and '90s and it was deemed the healthy alternative, it's actually worse than the original.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you mentioned is aspartame, and it's like, you know what? If people reasonably consume just white sugar, reasonably,
Yeah.
there's that's a pretty natural product. There's not any chemicals in that. Now it plays havoc with your blood sugar, so you've got to be careful. So that doesn't mean go eat a lot of candy, but it's like sugar is not this big huge demon if you're just going to replace it with artificial sweeteners, right? You're just better off eating the sugar.
Yeah, and that's what all those products are sold to everybody as a healthy alternative.
That's what I'm saying. The healthy alternative things, like the poster child of the worst thing was well, not worst thing, but everybody got conned into, and I guess that was the '80s and the '90s. Is is this Snackwells? It's like there's all these little desserts.
Lunchables, man.
And it's like, well, there's no fat in it, but it's all garbage. It's like, this is not healthy for you.
My
this is
family
not
got
good.
sold on the skim milk thing. It's like drink
Oh, okay.
skim milk, but basically that's like sugar water. It's got
Right.
like
You're
none
taking
of
the
the fat
protein
in
out and
there.
you just, it's the proportion of sugar in it goes way up because you've taken all the fat out and
And when
some of
you
the
feed
protein.
hogs skim milk, they get like super fat, man. Yeah, so it's a lot of these things that are sold to you as a healthy alternative.
Well, and that's just marketing, and that's just an industry that's because frankly, if you spent like I'm talking about the 80s and 90s, there was a whole boom of health consciousness during that period. People started running and doing different things, and they wanted to be healthier and whatever. So it's like, well, we made this product. It's you should eat or drink. Here's your Gatorade. And it's got chemical dyes in it, and here's your this, and
Yeah,
and it doesn't have any sugar in it, but it's full of crap. But we're not going to tell you that. And
yeah,
and frankly, did they know that those were going to be worse than what they were replacing? I have a feeling they thought they were doing a good thing, but as with most science, it's not complete until you kind of wait and see what happens. It's like, oh, that didn't work out really well, did it?
right. Well, I mean, if you go and look into the origins of some of this stuff, and how the Rockefeller family was funding a lot of the medical stuff, and was instrumental in starting the American Medical Association and funding universities and the research into health stuff to make their basically petrochemical pharmaceuticals look like a really good thing for everybody, and
Right,
how much they're changing the health of the population and everything.
right.
So
That's where they're actually before they got involved in that, functional medicine was just as common as anything else, and it just
yeah,
came to a point. It's like, um, you lost, and we're not going to support. We're only going to support the pharmacological treatment of diseases, and
yeah,
that this other stuff is we're not going to teach it in schools. We're not going to approve it by the medical associations. You're just a bunch of loons over there, even
right,
though it's effective and it worked. But they had the power to change things, and they did.
yeah. So Edward Bernays was really a big part of all that, selling that to the public, and even with the putting the fluoride in water, doing campaigns to tell everybody that that was a good idea and stuff like
Right.
that. So yeah, I mean, it really is like we're very much herd type beings, and
Sure.
so once a lot of people get convinced of something that you're very much considered a kind of a loon if you go against the grain of that. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's techniques for all
But
that in the
but
marketing and
but
advertising.
fortunately, I probably won't be alive long enough to see this and how it all plays out. But it is changing.
Yeah,
People people finally realize, and I'm speaking specifically not about sugar, but animal fat that was demonized for so long. And
right.
it's like, and now what is McDonald's is going back to using,
Steak
uh,
and Shake is the what I've
Steak
heard
and
is
Shake. Yeah, they're
one of them
using
that's
beef
starting to use
tallow.
beef
Yeah,
tallow to
yeah.
fry some of their stuff.
Because you know what, that's a smart move on their part because they're down the list on fast food. But you know what? There's people that'll go there just for that reason.
Right.
Just for that. I had an app. I don't use it now because I don't think the people who built it maintained it, but it was a an app about seed oils, and
Yeah.
it was kind of like a Yelp. You could kind of go and check out all the restaurants in your area that doesn't use seed oils.
Oh, okay.
And it's like that's kind of it things are changing, and I hope it continues to change, and people start questioning all these things. And I think uh, everybody has to recognize that, in the past 4 or 5 years, or maybe even longer, but it's been a slow process, as people are finally going, yeah, we've kind of been played here a little bit. And hopefully people are saying, my health is my responsibility. And, I'm not just going to listen to what's on the TV to tell me that this is good for me when they've been wrong so many times, right?
Yeah, and that's a good note to leave on is yeah, to take it upon yourself to, nobody's coming to save you. You really got to save yourself and the people that you care about, and you got to take the energy and the time and effort to do the research and look into this stuff for yourself and take that responsibility on. And you know if you want things to stay the same, continue to go down the path that you're going, and don't expect that everything's gonna be all sunshine and rainbows. So you got to take that responsibility on.
For sure. For sure.
Okay, John, where can people find you? Any closing remarks for the audience?
Closing remarks is, I thought we had a good conversation here. I enjoyed it. You can find me on X at Soul Survivor 78. You can drop me a DM, and if you have any questions, leave questions here. Hit Greg up on his channel, and we'll get it figured out. But everybody have a good week.
Awesome. Yeah. If you guys have any kind of topics or ideas for shows that you guys would like to hear us talk about, leave that in the comments on the video, and like the video, share it if you found value in it. Really appreciate that. And we'll see you guys next week. We do this every Sunday night that we can be available, and I hope you guys got some value out of this tonight, and we'll catch you next time.